There is a silence beneath all things. It waits not in joy or promise, but in the solemn knowing that every striving, every desire, every flicker of hope is but the shadow of a flame that never truly burns. It is here, in this sacred stillness, that life speaks without words, not to lift the spirit, but to reveal its burdens, not to inspire, but to unmask. What you call your life is not a project to complete, not a triumph to achieve, but a weight to carry through the fog of existence. And in that weight, something unspeakably real resides. From the moment breath enters the lungs, suffering begins its slow, rhythmic cadence, not as punishment, but as essence. Existence is not a garden of possibility, but a field of quiet despair strewn with the bones of vanished expectations. The child cries, not because it is weak, but because it is wise. Its innocence is not ignorance, but a first recognition of pain. The world does not corrupt it. It merely confirms what it already knew in its first gasp. To live is to ache without reprieve. You were told that life has meaning, that there is a thread connecting your suffering to some divine purpose, some golden destination beyond the hills of your sorrow. But this is the myth. The will spins, like a spider weaving its web not to understand, but to survive. The will is blind, not evil, not noble, merely indifferent, and it demands of you not clarity, but continuity. It drives you to eat, to breathe, to want, to climb, to grasp, and in each act, it deepens your entanglement. You do not live because life is good. You live because you are caught. What you call freedom is merely the illusion of choice, a performance staged in the theater of your own instincts. You dress your impulses in language, wrap your compulsions in the rhetoric of reason, but beneath every decision lies the same unspoken command: persist. The will does not care what path you take, so long as you do not stop. Whether you seek love or escape it, wealth or solitude, fame or erasure, the will dances through you, unconcerned with your suffering, obsessed only with its own continuance. Modernity, in its sterile brilliance, has found new ways to mask this ancient wound. It speaks in euphemisms, purpose, growth, fulfillment, and sells you distractions wrapped in polished steel and digital light. But beneath the algorithms and affirmations lies the same trembling, anxious animal that once wandered through forests and begged the sky for mercy. Civilization has not cured your fear. It has merely made it harder to name. You no longer kneel before gods, but you still kneel to schedules, to screens, to status. You no longer wear chains of iron, but you still carry chains. You are told to be productive, but to what end? Every task completed, every goal achieved, births another hunger, another lack. Satisfaction is always postponed, like a train that never arrives, its distant whistle echoing in the chambers of the soul. You are told to improve, to become, but who is this you that is supposed to evolve? Beneath every mask, every identity, every self-image, there is only a silent ache, a thirst that cannot be quenched, a presence that watches but never speaks. The more you chase clarity, the more elusive it becomes. The more you seek to define yourself, the more fragmented you feel. You read, you learn, you strive, yet wisdom slips through your fingers like dust. And in quiet moments, when the noise fades, there is only this vast, aching emptiness, not a void to be feared, but a truth to be met. It is the face of the world when all illusion has been stripped away. And still you ask, what is my purpose? But purpose is the opiate of the anxious, the drug of the ego, terrified of insignificance. You do not need a reason to exist. You already do. You are already here. You are the unfolding of blind necessity, the brief flicker of awareness in a cosmos that does not know your name. The question is not why you live. The question is whether you can see through the illusion and still remain. There is a strange kind of peace in this, not the peace of answers, but the peace of no longer asking. To stand still in the storm of becoming, to see through the dance of appearances, and know there is no dancer, only movement, only dream. This is not despair, it is liberation. For when all illusions die, what remains is not nothing, but something silent and vast, a witness beyond the will. Pain is not an error, it is the truth The body speaks when it remembers that it is not immortal. Suffering is not a failure of life. It is life's core, exposed. To suffer is not to fall from grace. It is to see, for a moment, the absence of grace. The world is not a poem. It is a wound. And yet, even wounds bleed beauty, if only for the briefest moment before fading into silence. You long to be seen, to be known, but what is it you wish to reveal? Is it not your own helplessness, your silent plea that someone, somewhere, understand what it is to carry a self you did not choose? Every relationship, every glance, every word is a trembling attempt to escape isolation, and yet the more you reveal, the less you are understood. Language fails, connection falters, and still you hope. But hope is the cruelest illusion. It stretches the future like a veil over the present, promising salvation just beyond reach. And so you wait, always wait for the next success, the next love, the next clarity, yet the next thing never arrives. Only the present remains unadorned, unpromising, complete in its lack of promise. To live without hope is not despair, it is truth. And what of death? That quiet dissolution you spend your life ignoring. It waits not with malice, but with indifference, not an enemy, but a boundary, a return. You fear it not because it ends you, but because it reveals that you never truly owned your existence. That your body was a borrowed garment, your mind a passing storm, your soul a question never answered. Death does not steal your purpose. It merely removes the illusion that there ever was one. If there is any dignity in life, it lies not in triumph, not in overcoming, but in the grace of seeing clearly, of standing, naked and trembling, in the light of what island. To suffer consciously is to be awake. To love without illusion is to mourn the beloved even in their embrace. To live deeply is not to escape pain, but to feel it without flinching. You need no reason to live deeply, for life itself is not a task, but a flame, flickering, fragile and brief. Let it burn, let it consume, and when it fades, let it go without struggle. There is no purpose waiting, there is only presence, and that is enough. Suffering is not the exception to existence. It is its spine, its marrow, its silent architect. Every joy is shadowed by the fear of its end, every gain by the certainty of loss. What you call happiness is but a momentary easing of pressure, a lull in the storm, not the clearing of the sky. The will deceives you with these reprieves, letting you taste sweetness only to ensure you remain tethered, craving, moving toward what will again slip through your fingers. This is the engine of the world, not justice, not beauty, not meaning, but the circular, ceaseless hunger of the will devouring itself. To suffer consciously is to know what it means to exist. Most flee from this knowledge into distractions, into roles, into the narcotics of culture. But for those who remain awake, each day unfolds not as a gift, but as a test of endurance, not against adversity, but against the unbearable clarity of things as they are. You begin to see that behind every smile is a mask, behind every goal a trap, behind every desire a wound that refuses to close. And still the world turns, as indifferent to your pain as it was to your birth. The illusions do not fall away easily. They are stitched into your breath, carved into the architecture of your mind. You were taught to hope as a child, to believe in the arc of progress, the kindness of time, the dignity of achievement. But the world has no arc. Time does not heal, it only blurs. And dignity, if it exists at all, is found not in achievement, but in the refusal to pretend that achievement matters. You are not ascending. You are circling. The spiral is not a staircase, but a whirlpool. Every human attachment is a mirror of this hunger. Love, friendship, even compassion, all are rooted in the desperate wish to escape oneself, to dissolve into another, to find some respite from the grinding solitude of selfhood. But no union lasts. No touch reaches the depths. Every embrace ends in separation. Every intimacy leaves a residue of longing that grows sharper with time. You do not share yourself with another. You only momentarily forget that you are alone. And still, the world seduces you. It promises identity through labor, worth through recognition, belonging through obedience. You become your profession, your politics, your preferences, not because they define you, but because they shield you from the terror of being undefined. The self becomes performance, curated and rehearsed, until even you begin to forget that behind the gestures there is only silence. Not a soul, not a light, only a witness staring into the dark. Even knowledge deceives. You collect facts, master systems, build theories, but all of it is scaffolding erected over the abyss. You may explain the world, but you do not understand it. You may map suffering, but you cannot remove it. Philosophy, like religion, fails not because it is false, but because it reaches for what cannot be held. The truth is not something you can possess. It is what remains when all possessions have been stripped away. What remains, then, when the masks fall, when the desires dissolve, when even meaning retreats into shadow. Only stillness, not peace, for peace suggests resolution. But stillness, the quiet recognition that there is nothing to chase, nothing to become, nothing to fear. To dwell in this stillness is not to transcend suffering, but to cease struggling against it. It is the dignity of the broken thing that no longer pretends to be whole. Most cannot bear this. They run back into the fire, into distraction, into noise. They seek the next goal, the next belief, the next identity. They fill the void with movement, hoping that if they move fast enough, the emptiness will not follow. But it always follows. It is not the absence of something. It is the presence of everything you have tried to avoid. It is the sound the world makes when you finally stop speaking. And what of joy? Does it exist? Yes, but not as the world defines it. Joy is not excitement, not pleasure, not victory. It is the quiet warmth that arises when you no longer need anything. It is the stillness in a room untouched by ambition. It is the strange light that flickers in the ruins after all the meaning has burned away. It is the laughter that escapes, not because life is beautiful, but because it is absurd and you are still here. Even art, in its highest form, does not redeem life. It only reveals its structure. It paints suffering in colors that do not scream. It shapes despair into forms that do not collapse. Art does not save, it bears witness. It is the mirror held up to the chaos, reflecting back not a lie, but a rhythm. And in that rhythm, something like compassion is born not toward the world, but toward oneself. Toward the one who suffers, who fails, who sees too much and yet remains. To live deeply is not to seek purpose, but to cease fleeing purposelessness. It is to sit in the ruins without rebuilding, to look into the mirror and not avert your gaze, to walk through the garden knowing it withers, to love even as you know it cannot last. This is not weakness. This is clarity. The weak pretend, the strong surrender. You do not need a purpose to live deeply, because purpose is a chain disguised as a map. It leads you in circles and calls it progress. It blinds you with its promise of destination, while the truth stands silently by the roadside, ignored. The deepest life is not a journey, but a descent into the self, into silence, into the truth that you were never meant to be more than what you already are. This descent is not a fall, it is a return, a peeling away of layers, a letting go. And beneath all the striving, all the wanting, all the becoming, you find a strange presence watching. It does not speak, it does not guide. It's simply island, and in its presence, everything softens, even sorrow, even fear. There is no salvation coming, no utopia, no final answer. Only this, the moment, stripped bare, the self, unmasked, the will, seen and stepped aside from, and the world, continuing unredeemed, unchanging, unbound. The further one travels inward, the less there is to grasp. What begins as a pursuit for understanding dissolves into the slow unraveling of the very desire to know. The intellect, so proud in its constructions, finds itself disarmed, disillusioned, and ultimately dismissed by the silence it cannot penetrate. Every explanation is a circle, every theory a mirror turned toward itself. Beneath all the systems lies a truth so simple, so absolute, that it cannot be spoken. Existence is, and that is all. What torments the human creature is not pain alone, but the awareness of it. A beast suffers, but does not reflect. Its agony is immediate, without echo. But in man, suffering finds its echo chamber. He does not simply hurt, he remembers hurting, anticipates hurting, constructs, elaborate metaphysical architectures around his hurt. The intellect, meant to illuminate, instead magnifies the agony by refusing to forget it. Every thought becomes a splinter, every memory a reopening of the wound. Consciousness is not light, but a mirror that cannot be turned away. Desire feeds upon this consciousness, like a parasite upon flesh. The more you see, the more you want, and the more you want, the more you suffer. You are told to aspire, to reach, to grow, as if you were a seed meant to become something other than what you already are. But growth is a euphemism for repetition. Each new version of the self is merely a rearrangement of the old, dressed in different justifications, scented with the perfume of novelty. You do not change, you recycle. The great error of modern man is to believe he is evolving. But evolution, if it exists, is not upward, it is outward, spreading the same anguish across wider territories. We build higher towers, not to escape the ground, but to forget how close we are to falling. We invent faster machines not to arrive, but to escape stillness. And we saturate our minds with information not to become wise, but to drown the unanswerable questions that gnaw at the base of our being. Society, in its collective blindness, rewards those who flee the most efficiently. The ideal citizen is not the wise one, but the productive one, the one who spins in the wheel without noticing the wheel. Work becomes religion, busyness the new morality. Rest is treated as laziness, contemplation as indulgence, despair as failure. But despair is not failure, it is lucidity. It is the point at which the veil thins and you glimpse, however briefly, the machinery behind the illusion. In that glimpse, the world becomes unbearable. You see the futility of striving, the emptiness of praise, the circularity of desire. Everything you were taught to value crumbles under the weight of its own absurdity. You no longer wish to play the game, but you are still trapped within the board. This is the moment many call depression, but it is not a sickness. It is a necessary descent, a stripping away, a quiet confrontation with the truth that there is no path forward, only a deeper settling into what island, and yet something strange begins to emerge from this collapse. Not hope for. Hope is a fantasy of the will, but clarity. In the absence of striving, there is still breathing. In the absence of purpose, there is still presence. And in the absence of becoming, there is a peculiar kind of being, not joyful, not triumphant, but still. A silence that is not empty, a solitude that is not loneliness, a presence that is not personal. It is here, in this interior twilight, that one begins to see beauty without desire. A decaying leaf, a cracked wall, the face of a stranger lost in thought, all become luminous, not because they signify something greater, but because they signify nothing. They are what they are. They ask for nothing, explain nothing, promise nothing, and in their indifference, they become sacred. Not holy in the religious sense, but untouchable by the machinery of will. Art that reaches this state does not uplift it, arrests. It holds the wheel, interrupts the cycle, forces you to see. Not beauty as redemption, but beauty as resistance. Resistance to the tyranny of function, of purpose, of value. It shows you the world not as it should be, but as it is, and that is more than enough. For in the absence of illusion, what remains is not despair, but wonder. A mute, unnameable wonder that asks for nothing but awareness. But awareness, too, is fleeting. It flickers, recedes, returns. You cannot hold it. You cannot become it. You can only dwell in it briefly, like a gust of wind through an open window. And then the will returns subtle, persistent, shapeless. A longing, a reaching, a whisper, become, and you fall again, willingly or not, into the rhythm of desire. This is the eternal return not of history, but of illusion. The veil is lifted, and then it falls again. The wise man does not resist this cycle. He does not seek to remain awakened, for that is another form of striving. He watches, he suffers, he sees, and in seeing, he ceases to demand. Life, for him, becomes a series of gestures not toward meaning, but away from illusion. Each act done not for outcome, but for the dignity of doing. Each moment met not with hope, but with stillness. And in that stillness, something like compassion is born, not for the world, but for the one caught in it. Compassion that does not seek to fix, to change, to save, but simply to witness, to acknowledge the burden of being without adding to it. This is not the compassion of saints, but of strangers who pass in silence, eyes meeting for a moment, recognizing the same wound behind different faces. It is the kindness that arises when all masks fall, when there is nothing left to protect. Not virtue, but solidarity. Not love, but presence. And so you continue not with purpose, not with certainty, but with a quiet grace. You eat, you walk, you rest. You watch the sky darken and do not curse it. You listen to the ache within and do not flee. You do not need to be happy. You do not need to be healed. You only need to be. And that is the final, most difficult surrender, not to the world, not to others, but to this moment, as it is, without condition. The will does not stop. It cannot. But you can step aside. You can let it move through you without becoming it. You can watch the hunger without feeding it. You can suffer without identifying with the pain. This is not transcendence. It is detachment. Not rising above, but sinking below into the ground of being where nothing is asked and nothing is given. To live deeply is not to become someone. It is to stop becoming. To fall into yourself like a stone into water, sinking past memory, past desire, past even fear, until you are simply there, unadorned, unimportant, unafraid. The silence deepens as the illusions fall away, not with a crash, but like snow dissolving into soil. Nothing dramatic, no revelation, no thunder, only the quiet collapse of all the scaffolding you once mistook for truth. What remains is not nothing, but a kind of metaphysical dusk, where things lose their shape and words no longer bind them. You are not lost. You are no longer pretending to be found. Even the body, once an instrument of will, now appears as a vessel of decay, not morbidly, but inevitably. Every heartbeat is a tolling bell, every breath a whisper of impermanence. This flesh, once celebrated, once adorned, once shamed, it is none of these things. It is only passing, and the one who inhabits it is not the master, but the passenger. The body carries you, not to triumph, but to dissolution, and there is nothing cruel in this, only truth long resisted. In youth, you were told the world was yours, that it awaited your imprint, your contribution, your legacy, but the world does not wait. It continues, indifferent, unmoved by your ambition or your sorrow. The mountains do not bend for your dreams, the sky does not darken for your grief. Even those closest to you, the ones who swear eternal solidarity, they too are shadows, passing through shadows. They too are seeking a way out of the storm. And love, even love, that great sanctuary of the human heart, is revealed in time to be not salvation, but reflection. You do not love the other. You love the silence they help you forget. You love the mirror they hold, however briefly, before it too fogs and fades. No love lasts, not because it fails, but because it fulfills its purpose, to remind you of your own isolation, to burn long enough that you feel the heat, and then withdraw, leaving only the ashes of awareness. Suffering reveals this with cruel precision. When pain comes true pain, the kind that silences all language, it strips you of all self-deception. No belief survives it, no philosophy endures. You are alone, not metaphorically, existentially. And in that solitude, the self becomes transparent. You see through it, like a window long obscured by fog. And beyond that self, there is no one waiting, no higher version, no eternal soul, only space, only stillness. But do not mistake this for nihilism. Nihilism is the resentment of the disillusioned, the cry of the will denied its prize. What I speak of is quieter. It is not revolt, but release. Not the scream, but the sigh. To let go of meaning is not to fall into chaos, but into clarity. The absence of meaning is not the end. It is the beginning of perception, unclouded by desire. Look around without wanting. See the world as it is, stripped of personal relevance. The tree does not grow for you. The river does not flow for you. The stars do not shine for your fate. They simply are, and in their being, they are complete. Your tragedy is not that the world is indifferent. It is that you ever thought it should be otherwise. Once this expectation dies, grief becomes reverence. The modern world, so loud, so proud, so desperate to appear full, is in truth the most hollow of all ages. Never before has man been so distracted and yet so aware of his emptiness. The screen, the schedule, the spectacle, all are opiates. They numb the ache for a while, but do not remove it. And when the noise stops, even for a moment, the silence returns stronger, like a wave that has gathered force behind the dam of distraction. No technology can protect you from this silence. No progress can outrun it, because it is not outside you, it is what you are beneath the noise. That is why you fear solitude, not because you are lonely, but because in solitude there is nothing left to reflect you back to yourself. And without reflection, who are you? Just breath, just flesh, just perception moving through time. No story, no meaning, only awareness unanchored, infinite. This is the true spiritual crisis of our age, not the loss of belief, but the terror of nothingness. We fear the void not because it is dark, but because it holds no mirror, no confirmation, no reward. But the void is not your enemy. It is the womb from which all things emerge. To sit with it, to let it surround you without fleeing, is to return to the source, not of life, but of being. And in this return, something unexpected happens. The will, once dominant, begins to weaken, not through suppression, but through neglect. Like a fire without fuel, it dims. Desires lose their urgency. Fears lose their teeth. You do not become numb, you become still. The chaos continues around you, but no longer within. You act, you move, you speak, but not to achieve, only to participate, as a wave participates in the ocean's movement. Detachment, then, is not withdrawal. It is intimacy without ownership. To see the world, to feel it deeply, to love it, but without claiming it, without needing it to reflect your worth. This is the highest form of compassion. To be with life as it is, without agenda, without resistance. And in that state, even suffering changes. It does not vanish, but it softens. It becomes part of the texture, not the wound. You carry it not as a burden, but as a companion, a reminder of the real, a marker of depth. For those who have never suffered do not see. Their joy is thin, their confidence brittle. Only those who have touched the bottom can live without fear. Not because they are strong, but because they have nothing left to lose. Their strength is surrender. You do not need a purpose to live deeply, because life, in its rawest form, is already deep beyond comprehension. You were thrown into this world without consent, without map, without meaning, and yet here you are, breathing, watching, feeling. Is that not miracle enough? Not the miracle of salvation, but of existence, of something instead of nothing. Let this be your truth, not a doctrine, not a creed, but a stillness, a stance. The quiet dignity of the one who sees through all masks and yet continues to move. Who knows the futility of striving and yet takes one more step, not in hope, not in despair, but in truth, in being. There is no final word, only the soft extinguishing of the voice that once named the void. What remains is not knowledge, but recognition, the hollow echo of a truth too vast to be spoken, too quiet to be claimed. The will still murmurs in the marrow, but its grip has loosened. You no longer mistake its demands for meaning. You no longer flinch when the silence deepens. You do not overcome the self, you outlast it. The world continues trees, swaying in indifferent wind, distant laughter carrying no weight, the sun setting with no audience, and in this unfolding there is no message, no moral, only the simplicity of being unaccompanied, unsought. What you once called suffering is now a rhythm, not an enemy. It passes through you like weather through open fields. You do not resist, you do not cling, you feel, you release. You have no name for this state. It is not peace, not joy, not awakening. It is simply the cessation of becoming. And so you sit, as the day collapses into dusk, and the dusk into the unlit quiet of night, no longer asking, no longer reaching. Watching as thought dims, as the need to explain dissolves, and the final illusion that something was ever missing fades. Nothing has changed, and everything is still.